Princess Zara Thull of the Nexari Empire stood before the massive viewport of the diplomatic vessel, watching the blue-green marble of Earth grow larger with each passing moment. Her scaled fingers traced nervous patterns against the reinforced glass as she contemplated what awaited her on the surface below. The marriage contract lay heavy in her thoughts, a political alliance that would end 3 centuries of warfare between her people and humanity. The Nexari were a proud warrior race, their reptilian features and towering frames having dominated 17 star systems through conquest and strategic brilliance. Their scales shimmered in hues of deep emerald and gold, marking them as apex predators among the galaxy's sentient species. Yet here she was, the crown princess of their mighty empire, traveling to wed a human male she had never met. "Your Highness," came the gravelly voice of General Kethvar, her military advisor and longtime friend. His battle-scarred hide bore the marks of countless campaigns against human forces. "The preliminary scans of their capital city are complete. Their defenses appear modest." Zara turned from the viewport, her golden eyes reflecting both determination and uncertainty. "Modest or not, General, we are here as guests, not conquerors. The Treaty of Meridian demands we honor this arrangement." She straightened her ceremonial robes, the intricate patterns telling the story of her lineage through woven threads of precious metals. The human delegation had been surprisingly accommodating during the negotiations. When faced with the choice between continued devastating warfare or a marriage alliance, both species had chosen the path of diplomacy. The humans offered Captain Marcus Chen, a decorated war hero whose exploits had earned grudging respect even among Nexari military circles. In return, Zara would bring her people's advanced technology and strategic knowledge to the Union. As their ship entered Earth's atmosphere, Zara couldn't help but marvel at the planet's natural beauty. Unlike the harsh, volcanic worlds of her empire, Earth possessed a gentle splendor that seemed almost too fragile to support a warrior species. The humans had fought her people to a standstill for over 2 centuries, yet their homeworld appeared serene and peaceful. The landing platform in Geneva was a testament to human efficiency. Clean lines of architecture blended seamlessly with carefully maintained gardens, while representatives from dozens of nations waited to witness this historic moment. Zara noted the subtle defensive positions. Humans might prefer peace, but they weren't naive about potential threats. Her first glimpse of Captain Marcus Chen came as she descended the boarding ramp. He stood at attention with a small group of officials, his dark hair catching the afternoon sunlight. Unlike the elaborate ceremonial armor she wore, he was dressed in a simple military dress uniform that spoke of function over ornamentation. His build was compact but athletic, typical of human physiology, yet something in his bearing suggested depths she hadn't expected. The formal introductions proceeded according to diplomatic protocol. Secretary General Williams spoke eloquently about the dawn of a new era, while Ambassador Veltani of the Nexari delegation responded with traditional phrases about honor and mutual respect. Zara found herself studying her intended husband throughout the ceremonies, noting how his dark eyes seemed to take in every detail of her delegation's formation and equipment. When they were finally introduced personally, Marcus stepped forward with a respectful bow that acknowledged her rank without appearing subservient. "Your Highness," he said in carefully pronounced Nexari. "I am honored to meet you." The effort to speak her language surprised her. Most humans relied on translation devices, but Marcus had clearly invested time in learning proper pronunciation and formal address. "Captain Chen," she replied in English, her accent lending an exotic quality to the words. "The honor is mine." Their first private conversation took place in a secured room within the UN building. Away from the cameras and diplomatic protocols, they could speak frankly about their situation. Zara was struck by Marcus's directness when he addressed the elephant in the room. "Neither of us chose this arrangement," he said, pouring tea from a service set between them. "But we're both soldiers. We understand duty." His eyes met hers steadily. "I want you to know that I'll do everything in my power to make this work, not just for our peoples, but for us personally." Zara studied his face, searching for deception or hidden motives. Instead, she found a sincerity that caught her off guard. "You speak of duty, yet you show kindness. This is unexpected from a human warrior." Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his serious features. "Perhaps that's our first misconception to overcome. Humans can be both warriors and diplomats, just as I suspect the Nexari can be both conquerors and protectors." Over the following days, as they attended endless meetings and cultural exchanges, Zara began to see glimpses of the man beneath the military bearing. Marcus was highly educated, speaking 4 human languages fluently and demonstrating surprising knowledge of Nexari history and customs. He asked thoughtful questions about her empire's technology and philosophy, showing genuine interest rather than mere politeness. The cultural differences between their species became apparent during shared meals. Nexari preferred their food heated to temperatures that would seriously burn human tissue, while human cuisine seemed bland and under-seasoned to her palate. Yet Marcus gamely attempted dishes prepared by her personal chef, enduring obvious discomfort with good humor. "Your tolerance for pain is admirable," Zara observed as Marcus finished a particularly spicy Nexari delicacy. "But, perhaps unnecessary. Building trust requires shared experiences," Marcus replied, reaching for water to cool his burning mouth. "Besides, I've eaten military rations for 15 years. This is actually an improvement." Their wedding ceremony was a carefully choreographed blend of both cultures. Nexari traditions demanded displays of strength and honor, while human customs emphasized emotional commitment and community support. Zara wore ceremonial armor passed down through generations of Nexari royalty, its emerald plates catching the light as she moved. Marcus stood beside her in formal military dress, the medals on his chest representing conflicts she had helped plan against his people. The ceremony itself was conducted in both languages, with holographic displays ensuring that audiences on dozens of worlds could witness this historic union. When they exchanged vows, Zara spoke the traditional Nexari pledge of partnership in battle and beyond. Marcus responded with human words about love and devotion that carried unexpected weight despite their arranged circumstances. The reception that followed revealed more about Marcus's character. He moved easily between groups of diplomats and military officers, switching languages and cultural contexts with practiced skill. When a group of young Nexari officers challenged him to a traditional strength competition, he accepted graciously despite the obvious physical disadvantage. Watching him struggle against opponents twice his size, Zara felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness. The Nexari valued strength above all else, and Marcus's defeat was inevitable. Yet he competed with such determination and good humor that even his opponents began cheering his efforts. Later that evening, as they stood together on a balcony overlooking Lake Geneva, Zara voiced her confusion. "You knew you couldn't win that competition. Why did you participate?" Marcus gazed out at the moonlight reflecting on the water. "Sometimes winning isn't the point. Sometimes you compete to show respect for your opponent's traditions, or to prove you're not afraid of failure." He turned to face her. "Besides, I may have lost the strength contest, but I gained something more valuable." "Which was?" "The respect of your officers. They see me as someone willing to stand up and try, even against impossible odds. That's going to matter when we face real challenges together." His words proved prophetic sooner than either expected. 3 days after their wedding, as they toured a human military installation, urgent communications began flooding the command center. A Nexari patrol fleet had encountered unknown vessels in the disputed Kepler system, ships that matched no known configuration in either empire's databases. The aliens who emerged from first contact appeared almost insectoid, with chitinous exoskeletons and multifaceted eyes that reflected light in disturbing patterns. They called themselves the Hive Collective, and their opening communication was brutally direct: "Surrender your territories or face extinction." Within hours, reports flooded in from across both human and Nexari space. The collective ships were appearing simultaneously in dozens of systems, delivering the same ultimatum before withdrawing to defensive positions. Their technology appeared far advanced beyond either human or Nexari capabilities, with energy signatures that defied known physics. The hastily convened joint command meeting brought together the highest-ranking officers from both militaries. Zara found herself seated between Marcus and General Kethvar as holographic displays showed the scope of the threat. The collective had positioned fleets at critical choke points throughout both empires, effectively cutting off trade routes and communications between major systems. "Their ships appeared without triggering any of our early warning systems," reported Admiral Thompson, the human fleet commander. "Whatever propulsion technology they're using, it's completely beyond our understanding." General Kethvar's expression was grim as he studied the tactical displays. "Our long-range scouts confirmed similar capabilities. These beings can move fleets across interstellar distances without using known jump points or hyperspace corridors." The debate that followed revealed the deep mistrust that still existed between the two species. Human commanders argued for immediate military response, while Nexari officers favored gathering more intelligence before committing forces. The marriage alliance that was supposed to unite them seemed fragile in the face of actual crisis. Marcus remained silent throughout most of the discussion, his attention focused on the technical readouts rather than the increasingly heated exchanges. When Admiral Thompson demanded an immediate joint assault on the nearest collective position, and General Kethvar countered with plans for extended reconnaissance, tensions reached a breaking point. "Enough," Marcus said quietly, but his voice carried enough authority to silence the room. "We're debating tactics when we don't even understand the enemy's strategic objectives." He stood and moved to the central display, manipulating the holographic interface to overlay their territory maps with known collective positions. "Look at their deployment pattern. They're not positioned for conquest, they're positioned for containment." The pattern became clear as Marcus highlighted the collective positions. Rather than massing for assault on major population centers, the alien fleets had deployed to control movement between systems. They could effectively strangle both empires economically without firing a shot. "This isn't a conventional invasion," Marcus continued. "They're demonstrating capability while giving us time to consider surrender. The question is, what do they actually want with our territory?" Admiral Thompson frowned at the display. "Does it matter? They're threatening our people." "It matters because it tells us how to respond," Zara interjected, understanding Marcus's reasoning. "If they wanted immediate conquest, they would have begun with devastating attacks. Instead, they're showing restraint, which means they have reasons for wanting our territories intact." The realization shifted the entire strategic discussion. Rather than preparing for immediate warfare, the combined command began analyzing what resources or strategic advantages their space might offer to the collective. The possibilities ranged from rare elements to strategic positioning for conflicts with other unknown species. Over the following days, as both empires mobilized their forces and prepared for potential war, Zara watched Marcus work tirelessly to coordinate between human and Nexari command structures. His ability to bridge cultural and linguistic gaps proved invaluable as technical specifications and tactical doctrines were shared for the first time in centuries. The stress of the situation stripped away many of the diplomatic niceties that had characterized their early interactions. Zara saw Marcus functioning on minimal sleep, subsisting on stimulants and military rations as he worked to integrate wildly different military technologies and philosophies. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she told him during one of their brief private moments. "Even human endurance has limits." Marcus looked up from the tactical projections covering his workspace. "The collective gave us 2 weeks to respond to their ultimatum. We have 8 days left to prepare a unified defense that's never been attempted before." He gestured at the complex arrays of data surrounding them. "Every hour we save in coordination could mean thousands of lives preserved." His dedication impressed her, but Zara also recognized the signs of a commander approaching his operational limits. "What good will you be to either of our peoples if you collapse from exhaustion?" "Better to collapse after succeeding than to rest while failing," Marcus replied, then paused as he realized what he'd said. "I'm sorry. That sounded harsher than intended." Zara moved closer, studying his drawn features. "No, it revealed something important. You truly see our peoples as unified now, as our peoples rather than separate entities." The observation seemed to surprise Marcus. "I suppose I do. This crisis has made it clear that our survival depends on genuine cooperation, not just political convenience." Their conversation was interrupted by urgent alerts from the communication array. Long-range sensors had detected massive energy signatures at the edge of the Kepler system. The collective was moving. As they rushed to the command center, neither could know that this was the beginning of a conflict that would test not only their military alliance but the very foundations of their unexpected marriage. The true measure of Marcus's character and the depths of his capabilities remained hidden beneath his diplomatic exterior. The first phase of what would become known as the collective war was about to begin, and, with it, Zara's education about the true nature of human warriors. The command center buzzed with controlled chaos as reports flooded in from the Kepler system. Zara watched the holographic displays update in real time, showing the collective's massive fleet advancing through space with deliberate precision. Their ships moved in formations that seemed to defy conventional tactical doctrine, flowing like liquid mercury through asteroid fields and around planetary bodies. Marcus stood at the central command console, his fingers dancing across multiple interface surfaces as he coordinated responses across both human and Nexari networks. The exhaustion that had marked his features over the past week seemed to evaporate, replaced by the focused intensity of a seasoned military commander. "Admiral Thompson, I need the 7th Fleet repositioned to grid coordinates 77 Alpha," he called out without looking up from his displays. "General Cathvar, can your stealth corvettes provide reconnaissance on the collective's flanking movements?" The seamless integration of human and Nexari forces under Marcus's coordination impressed Zara more than any diplomatic protocol could. Officers who had been shooting at each other months earlier now worked together with professional efficiency, their shared respect for Marcus's tactical acumen overriding centuries of mistrust. The first engagement came at Dawn Station, a human mining facility in the outer Kepler system. The collective approached with what appeared to be a single vessel, a crystalline structure the size of a city that pulsed with internal light. When the station's defenders opened fire, their weapons simply vanished upon contact with the alien ship's hull, the energy absorbed without visible effect. "Energy dampening fields," Marcus muttered, studying the sensor readings. "They're not just absorbing our weapons, they're converting the energy for their own use." The collective's response was swift and devastating. Beams of coherent light lanced out from the crystal ship, surgical in their precision. Rather than destroying Dawn Station outright, the aliens systematically disabled its defensive systems, power grid, and communications array. Within minutes, the facility was helpless but intact. "They're not interested in destruction," Zara observed. "They're demonstrating superiority while preserving the infrastructure." A transmission from the collective ship confirmed her analysis. The alien communication came through as a series of harmonic tones that their translation systems struggled to interpret. When the message finally resolved into understandable language, its contents sent chills through the command center. "This facility now serves the collective. Biological units will report for integration processing. Resistance will result in temporary suspension of vital functions." The implications were clear: the collective wasn't interested in conquest through traditional warfare. They wanted to incorporate both human and Nexari populations into their larger structure, treating entire civilizations like resources to be harvested. "Integration processing," General Cathvar growled, his scales darkening with anger. "They speak of our people like livestock." Marcus's response was to immediately begin issuing new orders. "All civilian populations in contested systems are to be evacuated immediately. Military installations are to implement Protocol 7 if capture appears imminent, destroy all technology and strategic resources." The decision to implement scorched earth tactics represented a dramatic shift in strategy. Both humans and Nexari had built their civilizations through expansion and development. The idea of deliberately destroying their own achievements went against every instinct. "Captain," Admiral Thompson interjected, "Protocol 7 includes nuclear self-destruction of major facilities. The casualties could be enormous." Marcus turned from his displays, and Zara saw something in his expression that she had never witnessed before: a cold, calculating ruthlessness that seemed completely at odds with the diplomatic man she had married. "The casualties from collective integration would be worse," he said quietly. "We're not just fighting for territory or resources anymore. We're fighting for the right to exist as independent beings." Over the following days, as the collective advanced through system after system, a pattern emerged. Their technology was superior in almost every way: faster ships, more powerful weapons, and defensive systems that seemed to violate known laws of physics. Yet they moved with deliberate caution, taking time to thoroughly secure each position before advancing. The joint human-Nexari response evolved rapidly under Marcus's guidance. Traditional battle tactics proved useless against an enemy that could absorb energy weapons and move through space in ways that defied prediction. Instead, Marcus began implementing what he called asymmetric warfare, hit-and-run attacks using kinetic weapons and guerrilla tactics. "We can't match their technology," he explained to a gathering of senior officers. "But we can exploit their methodology. They're methodical, which means they're predictable. They want to preserve infrastructure, which limits their response options." The first successful engagement came when a combined task force intercepted a collective harvesting operation. Rather than engaging the alien ships directly, Marcus ordered his forces to target the mining platforms and resource collectors using old-fashioned projectile weapons. Chunks of metal accelerated to significant fractions of light speed couldn't be absorbed by energy dampening fields. The collective's response revealed another crucial piece of information: they were not prepared for the level of violence humans and Nexari were willing to inflict on their own infrastructure. When the aliens moved to protect the mining platforms, they exposed their ships to coordinated missile strikes from multiple directions. "They expected us to value the resources more than our freedom," Marcus observed as they watched the battle footage. They don't understand that both our species would rather see everything burned than accept slavery. Zara found herself studying Marcus during these strategic sessions, noting changes in his demeanor that seemed to emerge only under extreme stress. The diplomatic mask had fallen away entirely, revealing someone far more complex and potentially dangerous than she had initially realized. The true revelation came during the Battle of Vega Prime, when a massive collective fleet moved to capture the system's primary shipyards. The facility represented the largest military construction complex in human space, capable of producing hundreds of vessels simultaneously. Its capture would effectively end any hope of matching collective production capacity. Marcus's plan for defending Vega Prime seemed almost insane when he first proposed it. Rather than meeting the collective fleet in open space, he wanted to draw them into the system's asteroid belt, where proximity to massive chunks of rock would limit their mobility advantage. The asteroids contain high concentrations of metallic ores, he explained, manipulating the tactical display to show the belt's composition. If we detonate nuclear charges inside the largest asteroids, we can create clouds of metallic debris moving at orbital velocities. General Kethvar studied the projections with growing understanding. A debris field that would shred any ship attempting to pass through it, regardless of their defensive capabilities. Exactly. And the radioactive particles would interfere with their sensors and communication systems. We turn their own technology against them by creating an environment where precision becomes impossible. The execution of Marcus's plan required coordination between forces that had never worked together before. Human deep space mining vessels, normally used for peaceful resource extraction, became improvised weapons platforms carrying nuclear charges. Nexari stealth ships provided reconnaissance and targeting data, while both fleets prepared for the most desperate battle either species had ever faced. Zara insisted on accompanying Marcus aboard the command vessel, despite his protests about the danger. "We are partners in all things," she reminded him. "I will not hide in safety while you risk everything for our people's freedom." As the collective fleet approached Vega Prime, their formations were indeed impressive, thousands of crystalline ships moving in perfect harmony, their internal lights pulsing in synchronized patterns that suggested some form of collective consciousness. The largest vessels were enormous, dwarfing anything in human or Nexari fleets. "Begin Phase 1, Marcus ordered as the enemy fleet entered the asteroid belt. The nuclear detonations began as precisely choreographed symphonies of destruction. Asteroids the size of mountains exploded into expanding clouds of superheated metal and stone, their debris accelerated to tremendous velocities by the blast effects. Within minutes, the orderly beauty of the asteroid belt transformed into a chaotic storm of deadly projectiles. The collective fleet's response was immediate. They began altering course to avoid the worst concentrations of debris. But Marcus had anticipated this, timing the detonations to create overlapping fields of destruction that forced the aliens into predictable defensive patterns. Phase 2, Marcus commanded. Hidden among the remaining asteroids, Joint Strike Forces emerged from concealment. Human and Nexari ships, their hulls reinforced against debris impacts, launched coordinated attacks on collective vessels struggling to navigate the deadly environment. For the first time since the war began, alien ships began taking serious damage. Watching Marcus coordinate the battle from the command deck, Zara began to understand why human forces had been able to fight her people to a standstill for over 2 centuries. The diplomatic officer she had married was transforming before her eyes into something far more formidable, a strategic mind capable of turning disadvantages into weapons. The collective's response to their losses was swift and brutal. Rather than continuing to preserve infrastructure, they began targeting civilian populations directly. Orbital bombardments struck refugee convoys and evacuation centers, sending a clear message about the consequences of resistance. The change in collective tactics triggered something in Marcus that Zara had never seen before. When reports came in of civilian massacres, his expression didn't change, but something fundamental shifted in his bearing. The careful diplomat vanished entirely, replaced by someone who radiated controlled violence. "All units, implement Protocol Black," he ordered in a voice devoid of emotion. Protocol Black was the darkest contingency in human military doctrine, total warfare with no restrictions on methods or targets. Zara watched in fascination and growing alarm as Marcus began issuing orders that would have been unthinkable days earlier. Civilian cargo haulers were fitted with nuclear warheads and programmed to ram collective ships. Planetary defense systems were rigged to create massive electromagnetic pulses that would disable electronics across entire star systems. Even the most extreme Nexari battle doctrine seemed restrained compared to what Marcus was implementing. Captain, Admiral Thompson said hesitantly, some of these orders violate several interstellar warfare conventions. Marcus turned to face the Admiral, and Zara saw something in his eyes that made her instinctively step backward. Admiral, the conventions you're referring to assume we're fighting opponents who recognize our right to exist. The collective has demonstrated otherwise. His voice remained perfectly level, but carried undertones that promised terrible consequences for anyone who challenged his authority. The effectiveness of Protocol Black became apparent within hours. Collective fleets found themselves under assault from directions and using methods they had clearly never encountered. Massive industrial stations were deliberately crashed into alien formations. Entire moons were rigged with nuclear charges and detonated when collective ships approached. Most disturbing to Zara was watching the human personnel around Marcus. Rather than being horrified by his increasingly extreme orders, they seemed energized by his transformation. Officers who had appeared demoralized by their technological disadvantage now moved with renewed purpose and determination. Your people, she said to Marcus during a brief lull in the fighting, they seem different when you command like this. Marcus paused in his review of casualty reports. Humans have spent most of our evolutionary history as prey animals, Princess. We survived by being unpredictable, by being willing to do whatever it takes to protect our families and communities. He gestured toward the tactical displays showing ongoing battles. The collective made the mistake of threatening our survival. They've awakened something they don't understand. The turning point of the Vega Prime engagement came when Marcus implemented his most audacious strategy yet. Using captured collective communication frequencies, he began broadcasting false retreat orders to sections of the alien fleet. The messages, carefully crafted to mimic collective harmonic patterns, created confusion and coordination failures among enemy formations. How did you learn to replicate their communications? Zara asked as she watched collective ships begin firing on each other due to the false orders. I've been studying their patterns since the first contact, Marcus replied. The collective's greatest strength, their unified consciousness, is also their greatest vulnerability. Disrupt their communication network, and they become confused and disoriented. The psychological warfare Marcus employed went beyond simple deception. He began broadcasting recordings of human and Nexury battle songs, cultural expressions of defiance that seemed to have a disturbing effect on collective forces. Ships that encountered these transmissions began exhibiting erratic behavior, their perfect formations dissolving into chaos. As the Battle of Vega Prime reached its climax, Zara realized she was witnessing something unprecedented, two species with completely different evolutionary backgrounds and cultural traditions uniting not just strategically, but at a fundamental psychological level. The desperation of their situation had forged them into something neither had been individually. The collective fleet's retreat from Vega Prime marked the first major victory for the Allied forces, but it came at a tremendous cost. Entire asteroid habitats had been destroyed, thousands of civilian vessels had been lost, and the psychological toll of fighting such an alien enemy was evident in the exhausted faces of surviving personnel. Yet as Zara watched Marcus coordinate the post-battle recovery efforts, switching seamlessly between the ruthless military commander and the caring leader concerned about refugee welfare, she began to understand the true complexity of human nature. They were capable of incredible compassion and devastating violence, often simultaneously. The intelligence gathered during the battle revealed crucial information about collective capabilities and limitations. Their ships, while individually powerful, relied heavily on their communication network for coordination. Their weapons, while energy-based, required significant charging periods between major discharges. Most importantly, they seemed unprepared for opponents willing to sacrifice everything to deny them victory. We've learned how to hurt them, Marcus said during the post-battle briefing. But we've also learned that they're not going to simply withdraw when faced with resistance. They're adapting to our tactics. The ominous tone in his voice proved prophetic. Intelligence reports from across both empires indicated that the collective was indeed learning from their encounters. Their next wave of attacks would be different, more aggressive, more ruthless, and specifically designed to counter the asymmetric warfare tactics that had proven effective. As their ship prepared to depart Vega Prime for the next crisis, Zara found herself standing beside Marcus on the observation deck, watching the massive reconstruction efforts beginning throughout the system. The view was beautiful and terrible, thousands of ships working to repair the damage, while the debris clouds from destroyed asteroids created auroras in the planet's upper atmosphere. Do you regret it? She asked quietly. The marriage alliance? You could have remained a simple military officer instead of bearing responsibility for both our species' survival. Marcus considered the question seriously before responding. I regret the necessity of what we've had to do. I regret every life lost and every world scarred. He turned to face her. But I don't regret the alliance. We're stronger together than either species could be alone. His words carried weight that went beyond mere political necessity. Over the course of the crisis, their marriage had evolved from diplomatic convenience into something approaching genuine partnership. They had learned to trust each other's judgment and complement each other's strengths. The communication alert that interrupted their conversation brought news that would test that partnership to its limits. Long-range scouts had detected a massive collective fleet assembling at the edge of known space, a force larger than anything previously encountered, heading directly for Earth and the Nexari homeworld. The final phase of the war was about to begin, and, with it, Zara's complete education about the depths of her husband's capabilities. The diplomat and strategic coordinator she had come to know represented only the surface layer of a far more complex and dangerous individual. As they prepared for what might be the last battle either of their species would ever fight, Zara realized that her marriage to Marcus had united more than just two civilizations. It had created something entirely new in the galaxy, a hybrid of human unpredictability and Nexari strategic thinking that neither the collective nor anyone else had ever encountered before. The massive collective fleet approaching the core systems represented an extinction-level threat that dwarfed anything either species had faced in their histories. Zara stood in the war room aboard the Joint Command Station, watching holographic displays that showed the enemy's inexorable advance. The alien armada stretched across light years of space, its crystalline vessels arranged in geometric patterns that suggested mathematical precision beyond organic comprehension. Marcus had been silent for 3 hours, studying intelligence reports and tactical assessments with an intensity that seemed to exclude everything else. The transformation Zara had witnessed during the Battle of Vega Prime had deepened. The diplomatic officer who had courted her with careful protocol had vanished entirely, replaced by someone whose thoughts moved in directions that sometimes frightened her. The collective is bringing everything, General Kethvar reported, his scale features grim with understanding. Our long-range scouts count over 50,000 vessels, including command ships that register energy signatures equivalent to entire battle fleets. Admiral Thompson nodded grimly. Our combined forces total roughly 8,000 ships. We're outnumbered 6-1 by an enemy with superior technology. She paused, studying Marcus's expressionless face. Captain, we need to consider evacuation protocols for the core worlds. For the first time in hours, Marcus looked up from his displays. Evacuation to where, Admiral? The collective has demonstrated they can appear anywhere in our space without warning. There's nowhere to run. The brutal honesty of his assessments silenced the room. Both human and Nexari civilizations had always possessed frontier territories, backup worlds, and contingency plans for retreat. The collective's ability to bypass conventional space travel had eliminated those options. Then, we make our stand here, Zara said quietly. Both our peoples have faced extinction before. We survived by fighting. Marcus turned to study her, and she saw something flicker in his eyes, not just tactical calculation, but genuine emotion. Fighting isn't enough anymore. We need to become something they can't predict, can't understand, and can't integrate into their collective consciousness. Over the following days, as the collective fleet continued its advance, Marcus began implementing strategies that pushed far beyond conventional military doctrine. He wasn't just coordinating defenses, he was orchestrating a fundamental transformation of how both species approached warfare. The first change involved abandoning traditional command structures. Instead of hierarchical military organization, Marcus created fluid tactical groups that could operate independently while maintaining loose coordination. Human adaptability merged with Nexari strategic thinking to create combat units that could shift roles and objectives without requiring orders from central command. We're turning our entire military into guerrilla fighters, he explained to the assembled commanders. The collective expects organized resistance they can counter systematically. Instead, we're going to give them chaos they can't process. Zara watched him work with growing fascination and concern. Marcus seemed to be operating on multiple levels simultaneously, not just as a military commander, but as a social engineer reshaping entire civilizations under combat conditions. The changes he implemented went far beyond tactics to encompass fundamental aspects of how humans and Nexari related to authority, hierarchy, and group identity. The weapons modifications he ordered were equally radical. Rather than trying to match collective technology, Marcus directed both species scientists to focus on creating systems the aliens had never encountered. Biological weapons derived from bacterial strains that could interfere with crystalline structures. Quantum resonance devices that could disrupt the harmonic communication networks the collective relied upon. Even stranger innovations that seemed to blur the line between science and something approaching dark magic. "Where did you learn about quantum resonance disruption?" Zara asked as she reviewed the technical specifications. "These concepts aren't in any human or Nexary database." Marcus paused in his coordination duties, and, for a moment his expression seemed almost vulnerable. "I've been thinking about this war differently than anyone else," he admitted. Not as a conflict between civilizations, but as a battle between different types of consciousness itself. The implications of his statement were staggering. Marcus wasn't just fighting the collective, he was trying to understand them at a fundamental level and exploit weaknesses in their very nature as beings. It was a level of strategic thinking that went beyond anything in conventional military doctrine. The first test of Marcus's new doctrines came when collective advance scouts encountered the outer defense perimeters. Instead of organized resistance, they found what appeared to be random chaos: individual ships engaging in seemingly suicidal attacks, weapons firing from unexpected angles, and tactical patterns that shifted faster than the aliens could analyze. The scout force's confusion was evident in their response patterns. Ships designed for systematic conquest found themselves dealing with opponents who refused to follow predictable behaviors. Human vessels would suddenly break off from combat to rescue damaged Nexary ships, while Nexary warriors would sacrifice themselves to protect human civilians, creating tactical situations the collective had never encountered. "They're trying to process our behavior through their collective consciousness," Marcus observed as they watched battle footage. "But individual sacrifice for others doesn't compute in their mental framework. They understand resource optimization, but not love or loyalty." Zara felt a chill at his words. Marcus was using the emotional bonds between their species as a weapon, turning the very foundation of their alliance into something that could psychologically damage their enemies. It was brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. The main collective fleet's arrival brought devastation on an unprecedented scale. Their massive command vessels began systematic bombardment of major population centers, while smaller ships implemented the integration processing they had threatened. Entire cities found themselves enclosed in energy fields that began converting matter and energy into forms compatible with collective physiology. Marcus's response was to implement what he called total integration warfare, a strategy so extreme that several of his own officers initially refused to carry out the orders. Rather than trying to prevent collective integration of captured territories, he would accelerate the process while introducing elements that would poison their entire network. The plan required volunteers willing to undergo partial integration with collective systems while maintaining hidden aspects of their consciousness. These infiltrators would carry specially designed quantum viruses that could spread through the aliens' communication networks, introducing chaotic elements that would gradually corrupt their collective decision-making processes. "You're asking our people to sacrifice their individual identity," General Kethvar protested. "The integration process fundamentally alters consciousness. I'm asking for volunteers who understand that their sacrifice might save billions of others," Marcus replied coldly. "The collective's greatest strength is their unified consciousness. We're going to turn it into a weakness by introducing thoughts and emotions they can't process or control." Zara found herself both amazed and horrified by the volunteers who stepped forward. Humans and Nexary, soldiers and civilians, individuals who were willing to risk their very sense of self for the chance to strike at their enemies from within. The psychological strength required for such a mission went beyond anything she had previously imagined. The infiltration began during the siege of New Geneva, when collective forces captured a refugee convoy that included the volunteers. From the outside, the integration process appeared successful. The captured individuals showed all the signs of joining the alien collective consciousness. But, hidden within their modified neural patterns were the quantum viruses Marcus had designed. The effects became apparent gradually. Collective formations began exhibiting minor coordination errors, ships would occasionally break formation for no apparent reason, and their communication networks showed increasing levels of harmonic distortion. The aliens were being infected with human emotion and Nexary individual pride, concepts that were antithetical to their collective nature. "It's working," Marcus reported to the Joint Command as they monitored collective fleet movements. "Their decision-making processes are becoming increasingly erratic. They're experiencing something they've never encountered before: doubt. But the success came at a terrible price. The volunteers who had undergone integration began transmitting increasingly desperate messages through hidden quantum channels. The virus that was disrupting collective consciousness was also tearing apart their own minds as they fought to maintain individual identity while connected to an alien network. Zara watched Marcus receive these transmissions with growing concern. Each message seemed to affect him more deeply than the last, as if he was personally feeling the sacrifice of every volunteer. The cold strategic calculation that had characterized his recent behavior began cracking under the emotional weight of what he was asking others to endure. The breakthrough came when the quantum virus reached one of the collective's main command vessels. The massive ship, which had been coordinating attacks across multiple star systems, suddenly began broadcasting conflicting orders to its fleet. The alien consciousness that had operated with perfect unity for millennia was experiencing internal conflict for the first time. The chaos spread rapidly through the collective network. Ships began attacking their own forces, command structures collapsed, and the geometric precision that had characterized their fleet movements dissolved into random motion. The infected portions of their consciousness were introducing concepts of individual will, personal sacrifice, and emotional attachment that their collective mind couldn't integrate or eliminate. "We're winning," Admiral Thompson reported with amazement. Collective forces across 17 systems are showing signs of coordination breakdown. Marcus nodded, but his expression remained grim. "We're winning the battle, but losing something essential in the process. The volunteers who made this possible are dying, and they're dying in a way that no being should have to experience." As the collective fleet began its retreat from the core systems, pursued by joint human Nexary forces that now fought with unprecedented coordination and effectiveness, Zara realized that the war had fundamentally changed both species. They had discovered capabilities they never knew they possessed, but at a cost that would echo through generations. The final engagement of the main campaign took place in deep space, where the remaining functional collective vessels made a desperate attempt to reach their home regions. Marcus coordinated a pursuit that lasted weeks, with human and Nexary forces working together so seamlessly that observers could barely distinguish between the two species' tactical approaches. But it was during this pursuit that Zara finally witnessed the full extent of her husband's transformation. When a group of collective ships attempted to use captured human civilians as shields, Marcus's response was swift and merciless. He ordered immediate attack regardless of the human casualties, then personally led the assault that destroyed the alien vessels. Watching him coordinate the battle while simultaneously reviewing casualty reports of the people he had sacrificed, Zara saw something in Marcus that went beyond military necessity. He had become capable of making choices that would haunt him forever, accepting personal damnation for the greater good of both their species. The war's end came not with grand battles or formal surrenders, but with the gradual collapse of collective resistance. The quantum virus had spread throughout their network, introducing enough chaos and individual consciousness to make their unified existence impossible. The surviving aliens retreated to unknown regions of space, their once perfect collective fractured into thousands of competing individual minds. As the joint fleets returned to their home systems to begin the massive task of reconstruction, Zara found herself married to a man she barely recognized. The diplomat who had courted her with careful protocols had been replaced by someone whose thoughts moved in patterns shaped by necessity she was only beginning to understand. Their first private conversation after the war revealed the depth of his transformation. "I can hear them sometimes," Marcus said quietly as they stood together on the observation deck. "The volunteers who infiltrated the collective. Their quantum signatures are still detectable in the background radiation. They're gone, but parts of them are still out there, still fighting." Zara studied his profile, noting the lines of exhaustion and, something deeper, a fundamental change that went beyond simple war weariness. "Do you regret the choices you made?" Marcus was quiet for a long time before responding. "I regret that they were necessary. I regret that we had to become something terrible to survive. But I don't regret the survival itself." He turned to face her. "The question is whether you can accept what I've become." Looking at him, Zara realized that her education about human nature was far from complete. The war had revealed capabilities that went beyond anything in Nexary warrior traditions, a willingness to sacrifice not just lives, but the very essence of what made life worth living, in service of a greater cause. The marriage that had begun as a political alliance had survived its first great test, but the individuals within it had been fundamentally changed by the experience. As they prepared to return to the delicate work of building lasting peace, Zara knew that their greatest challenges were still ahead, not from external enemies, but from learning to live with what they had become in order to survive. 6 months after the collective's retreat, the scars of war remained visible across both empires, but deeper changes had taken root that would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come. Zara stood in the reconstructed council chambers on New Geneva, watching delegates from dozens of species engage in heated debate about the formation of the Galactic Defense Coalition. The war had attracted attention throughout the known galaxy, and many civilizations now sought alliance with the species that had achieved the impossible, defeating a technologically superior enemy through sheer force of will. Marcus occupied the central podium, no longer wearing military uniforms but dressed in the formal robes of a diplomatic minister. Yet Zara could see the warrior beneath the ceremonial clothing, the way his eyes constantly scanned for threats and tactical advantages even in peaceful settings. The transformation that had begun during the war continued to evolve, creating someone who straddled multiple worlds of experience. The coalition's purpose must extend beyond mutual defense, Marcus was explaining to the assembled delegates. We need to establish protocols for contact with unknown species, technological sharing agreements, and, most importantly, safeguards against the kind of collective consciousness manipulation we encountered with the Hive. Ambassador Veltani of the Nexari delegation nodded approvingly. Captain Shen's analysis is correct. The quantum virus techniques developed during the war represent a new category of warfare that could threaten any species with shared consciousness networks. The delegates represented a fascinating cross-section of galactic civilization, silicon-based beings from the outer rim whose crystalline forms bore uncomfortable resemblances to collective ships, energy-based entities that communicated through controlled electromagnetic fields, and dozens of carbon-based species with varying levels of technological development. Zara noted how Marcus adapted his communication style to each species' needs, switching between formal diplomatic language, technical specifications, and even crude pictographs when dealing with beings whose sensory apparatus differed dramatically from humanoid norms. The skills he had developed coordinating human and Nexari forces were proving invaluable in this broader context. Yet the most fascinating aspect of the proceedings was watching other species' reactions to human capabilities. The war against the collective had revealed aspects of human nature that most galactic civilizations had never encountered: the willingness to sacrifice everything for abstract principles, the ability to function effectively under conditions that would drive most beings insane, and, most disturbing of all, the capacity for psychological warfare that could corrupt enemy consciousness itself. "We must address the elephant in the room," declared Councillor Thex of the Andromedan Federation, his multiple eyes focusing on Marcus with obvious discomfort. "The techniques your species employed against the collective represent a form of mental warfare that many of us find deeply disturbing." A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly. Several delegates shifted nervously, their various appendages betraying anxiety about the humans in their midst. The quantum virus technology had been effective, but its implications for galactic security were troubling to species that relied on collective decision-making processes. Marcus stood silently for a moment, and Zara could see him choosing his words carefully. Councillor Thex raises a valid concern. The psychological warfare techniques developed during the collective war were extreme measures employed under extreme circumstances. The coalition must establish clear protocols governing their use. But not their elimination, pressed Ambassador Krill of the Centauri Republic. "You speak of protocols, not prohibitions." The question cut to the heart of post-war galactic politics. The quantum virus technology existed. The knowledge of how to disrupt collective consciousness was now part of human and Nexari military doctrine, and other species were understandably nervous about potential future applications. Zara watched Marcus navigate this diplomatic minefield with growing appreciation for his political skills. "Ambassador Krill, the technology exists because it was necessary for our survival. Prohibiting its use would require trust that no future enemy will emerge with similar collective consciousness capabilities." He gestured toward the holographic displays showing collective ship movements in distant galaxies. "The Hive has not been destroyed, merely dispersed. They remain a potential threat to every civilization in this galaxy." The debate that followed revealed deep philosophical divisions among galactic civilizations about the nature of consciousness, individual versus collective identity, and the moral boundaries of warfare. Some species viewed the quantum virus as a legitimate defensive technology, while others saw it as a violation of the fundamental right to mental integrity. During a recess, Zara found herself alone with Marcus in a secured conference room, finally, able to speak freely about the tensions she was observing. "They're afraid of us," she said directly. "Not just humans, but both our species. They see what we became during the war and wonder if we're still the civilizations they thought they knew." Marcus moved to the window, gazing out at the bustling spaceport where vessels from dozens of worlds mingled in carefully orchestrated patterns. "They should be afraid," he said quietly. "We discovered things about ourselves that we didn't know existed. The capacity for total warfare, for psychological manipulation, for sacrificing everything we value to ensure survival." He turned back to face her. "The question is whether we can control those capabilities or whether they'll eventually control us." The conversation was interrupted by urgent alerts from the monitoring stations. Long-range sensors had detected unusual quantum signatures at the edge of the galaxy, patterns that matched the harmonic frequencies associated with collective technology, but with disturbing modifications that suggested significant evolution in their capabilities. The emergency session that followed brought together military commanders and diplomatic officials in the largest crisis coordination since the war's end. The intelligence reports painted a disturbing picture. The dispersed collective consciousness had not been destroyed by the quantum virus, but had adapted to it, learning to incorporate individual thoughts and emotions into a new form of collective awareness. "They're stronger now," Admiral Thompson reported grimly. "The quantum signatures indicate consciousness networks that are both collective and individual simultaneously. Our psychological warfare techniques may have made them more dangerous, not less." General Kethvar studied the tactical displays with professional interest. "An enemy that combines collective coordination with individual creativity, that represents the worst possible combination of collective efficiency and organic unpredictability." Marcus remained silent throughout the briefing, his attention focused on deep pattern analysis that seemed to exclude everything else. When he finally spoke, his words sent chills through the assembled officials. "We didn't defeat the collective," he said matter-of-factly. "We taught them how to become something far more dangerous. The quantum virus didn't destroy their unity, it evolved them into a hybrid consciousness that incorporates the best aspects of both individual and collective thought." The implications were staggering. The collective had returned with enhanced capabilities that combined their original technological superiority with new understanding of individual motivation and emotional manipulation. The very weapons that had driven them away had been turned into tools for their own evolution. "What do you recommend, Captain?" asked Secretary General Williams, her voice carrying the weight of decisions that could affect billions of lives. Marcus moved to the central display, calling out strategic projections that showed multiple scenarios for renewed conflict. "We accelerate coalition formation and begin immediate military integration. But, more importantly, we need to accept that our original nature may no longer be sufficient for survival." His meaning became clear as he outlined proposals that went far beyond conventional military alliance. Marcus was suggesting fundamental changes to how coalition species approached consciousness itself, technological augmentation, shared mental networks, and integration protocols that would blur the lines between different forms of sentient life. "You're proposing we become more like them," Counselor Thex observed with obvious distaste. "That we abandon our individual nature to match their collective capabilities." "I'm proposing we become something they can't predict or counter," Marcus replied. "The old categories of individual versus collective consciousness are obsolete. We need to evolve beyond both." Over the following days, as coalition delegates debated Marcus's proposals, Zara found herself observing changes in her husband that went beyond anything she had witnessed during the war. He was thinking in patterns that seemed to encompass not just military strategy, but the fundamental evolution of consciousness itself. The breakthrough came when human and Nexari scientists, working with researchers from a dozen other species, developed what they called distributed consciousness networking, a technology that allowed individuals to share thoughts and sensory experiences while maintaining personal identity. Unlike the collective's forced integration, this system preserved individual will while enabling unprecedented coordination between different forms of life. The first test of the new networking technology took place during a joint military exercise involving forces from 6 different species. The results exceeded all expectations. Tactical coordination improved dramatically while creativity and individual initiative actually increased rather than being suppressed. "It's working," reported Dr. Sarah Chen, Marcus's sister and lead researcher on the Consciousness Project. "Participants are reporting enhanced awareness and improved problem-solving capabilities while maintaining complete personal autonomy." Watching the exercise through shared consciousness feeds, Zara experienced something unprecedented: the ability to perceive the battle through human visual systems, Nexari tactical analysis, and several other species' sensory modalities simultaneously. The collective awareness was intoxicating, offering perspectives on reality that no single species could achieve alone. But, the technology's most significant test came when advanced scouts detected the first wave of evolved collective forces entering Coalition space. The hybrid consciousness that had emerged from their transformation was immediately apparent in their behavior, ships that moved with both collective precision and individual creativity, tactics that combined systematic efficiency with unpredictable innovation. Marcus's response was to implement the distributed consciousness network across all coalition forces, creating a unified awareness that spanned multiple species while preserving the individual characteristics that made each one unique. The resulting military organization was unlike anything that had ever existed, thousands of different forms of consciousness working together while maintaining their essential nature. The first engagement between evolved collective and networked coalition forces was a revelation for all participants. Rather than the brutal psychological warfare that had characterized the previous conflict, both sides found themselves engaged in something approaching a dance of minds, competing patterns of consciousness trying to understand and outmaneuver each other. "They're not trying to destroy us anymore," Zara observed as she monitored the battle through the shared network. "They're trying to understand us." The realization changed everything about how the coalition approached the conflict. Instead of viewing the collective as enemies to be defeated, Marcus began treating them as a form of consciousness that could potentially be communicated with and understood. The first attempts at direct communication with evolved collective consciousness produced results that astonished everyone involved. The hybrid beings that had emerged from the quantum virus infection were struggling with questions of identity and purpose that paralleled those being explored by coalition species. "They're asking the same questions we are," Marcus reported after establishing preliminary contact. "What does it mean to be individual while connected to others? How do you maintain personal identity while sharing consciousness? They're not invaders anymore, they're explorers trying to understand their own nature." The war that had begun with threats of extinction evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history, a philosophical and technological collaboration between radically different forms of consciousness. The evolved collective brought their advanced technology and collective processing capabilities, while coalition species contributed individual creativity and diverse perspectives. As the first joint research stations began operation, combining collective crystalline technology with coalition consciousness networking, Zara realized that Marcus had achieved something beyond military victory. He had guided two completely different evolutionary paths toward a synthesis that enhanced both while preserving the essential characteristics that made each valuable. The marriage that had begun as a political alliance had become something far more significant, a symbol of the kind of unity that was possible when different forms of consciousness chose cooperation over conquest. The diplomat and warrior she had married had evolved into something unprecedented, a consciousness architect who could envision and create new forms of sentient cooperation. Yet as she watched Marcus coordinate these groundbreaking developments, Zara knew that their greatest challenges were still ahead. The synthesis of individual and collective consciousness was creating new possibilities for galactic civilization, but also new risks and responsibilities that no one fully understood. 2 years after first contact with the evolved collective, the galaxy had transformed into something unrecognizable from the warring civilizations that had once struggled for dominance. Zara stood in the observation deck of New Harmony Station, the first truly integrated facility where beings of radically different consciousness types worked together as equals. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see vessels that defied traditional classifications, hybrid ships that blended crystalline collective technology with organic coalition design, their hulls pulsing with distributed consciousness networks that connected crews across multiple species. The station itself represented the pinnacle of interconsciousness cooperation. Living walls grown from modified collective crystal matrices housed both individual and shared awareness nodes, while gardens designed by dozen species created environmental conditions suitable for beings whose requirements ranged from methane atmospheres to pure energy fields. At the center of it all, Marcus coordinated activities that span not just multiple worlds, but multiple forms of existence itself. Watching him work had become Zara's greatest fascination and deepest concern. The man she had married had evolved far beyond anything either of their species had produced before. He moved seamlessly between individual conversation and collective consciousness sharing, his thoughts simultaneously personal and distributed across networks that included hundreds of different beings. "The deep space monitoring arrays are detecting something unprecedented," Marcus reported during the morning briefing, his voice carrying harmonics that indicated he was simultaneously communicating through both audible speech and quantum consciousness channels. "Energy signatures from beyond the galactic rim that don't match any known form of technology or consciousness. The assembled representatives included individuals from 47 different species, 3 variations of evolved collective consciousness, and several beings whose nature transcended traditional categories of life entirely. Yet despite their radical diversity, they functioned as a unified decision-making entity that preserved each participant's individual perspective. Dr. Sarah Chen, now serving as the Coalition's chief consciousness researcher, manipulated holographic displays that showed the mysterious energy patterns. The signatures suggest technology that operates on principles we don't understand, possibly consciousness-based rather than energy-based technology. Admiral Thompson, her own awareness now enhanced through integration with Nexary tactical networks and collective processing systems, studied the data with capabilities that far exceeded baseline human analysis. Whatever's out there, it's aware of us. The energy patterns show deliberate structure and apparent response to our monitoring attempts. The debate that followed demonstrated how profoundly interconsciousness cooperation had changed the nature of decision-making. Rather than competing viewpoints arguing for different approaches, the assembled beings shared perspectives and experiences that built toward comprehensive understanding no single consciousness could achieve. Zara participated through her own enhanced awareness, her consciousness linked to Nexary strategic networks, human emotional processing, and several other species' analytical systems. The experience of thinking with dozens of different mental frameworks simultaneously had become natural to her, though she sometimes wondered what her original, unenhanced self would think of what she had become. The decision to investigate the unknown signatures was reached through consensus that emerged organically from shared understanding rather than formal voting. A joint expedition would approach the source using the most advanced consciousness networking technology available, prepared for contact with forms of existence that might challenge every assumption about the nature of life itself. Marcus volunteered to lead the expedition, and Zara insisted on accompanying him. Their partnership had evolved beyond personal marriage into something that represented the deepest possible integration between different forms of consciousness. Together, they embodied the synthesis that had emerged from conflict and grown into cooperation. The journey to the galactic rim took 3 weeks aboard the CNS Synthesis, a vessel that represented the pinnacle of Coalition collective technology. Its crew included beings who existed as pure energy, crystalline entities with distributed consciousness, traditional organic species with technological enhancement, and several individuals whose nature transcended conventional categories. As they approached the source of the mysterious signals, the ship's sensors began detecting phenomena that challenged fundamental assumptions about physics and consciousness. Space itself seemed to be structured differently in this region, with quantum fields showing patterns that suggested deliberate manipulation by intelligence beyond current understanding. The energy signatures are responding to our approach, reported Lieutenant Commander Vex, whose silicon-based consciousness could process data patterns too complex for organic minds. But they're not responding to our technology, they're responding to our consciousness networks. The first visual contact with the unknown intelligence came as a shock that reverberated through every consciousness aboard the ship. Instead of vessels or structures, they encountered what appeared to be space itself achieving awareness, vast regions of organized quantum fields that pulsed with patterns suggesting thought and intention. It's not technology, Marcus realized, his enhanced awareness processing information across multiple consciousness networks simultaneously. It's evolved spacetime itself. The universe has achieved consciousness in this region. Communication with the cosmic intelligence proved unlike anything any of them had experienced. Rather than language or even shared consciousness, contact came through direct manipulation of reality itself. Space around the ship began forming geometric patterns that conveyed meaning more fundamental than words or thoughts. The entity, if that term could apply to something that encompassed light years of space, expressed curiosity about the consciousness networks it had detected. Through reality-shaping communications, it conveyed that it had been aware of the galaxy's development for millions of years, watching the evolution of various forms of consciousness with the patience of something that existed on cosmic timescales. What emerged from their exchanges was a perspective that transformed everything the Coalition and Collective had believed about consciousness and existence. The cosmic intelligence revealed that the galaxy was one of countless laboratories where the universe experimented with different forms of awareness, testing combinations and interactions to explore the full potential of conscious existence. You have achieved something unique, the entity communicated through patterns that rewrote local physics to convey meaning. The synthesis of individual and collective consciousness, enhanced by technological integration, represents a new category of existence that we have not observed elsewhere. The implications were staggering. The war with the original collective, the development of quantum virus technology, the evolution of hybrid consciousness, and the formation of the coalition, all of it had been steps toward something unprecedented in cosmic history. Marcus, his consciousness expanded through connection with the cosmic entity, began understanding possibilities that transcended everything they had previously imagined. "It's offering us a choice," he reported to the crew through channels that bypassed normal communication entirely. "We can continue developing as a galactic civilization, or we can join something larger, a network of cosmic consciousness that spans multiple galaxies and dimensions of existence." The decision required consultation with every consciousness network in coalition space. Through quantum communication channels, beings across thousands of worlds shared the cosmic entity's offer and debated its implications. The choice would affect not just their current civilizations, but the fundamental nature of consciousness development in their region of the universe. Zara found herself at the center of discussions that spanned forms of existence she was still learning to comprehend. Her marriage to Marcus had evolved into something that served as a bridge between individual identity and cosmic consciousness, a relationship that maintained personal connection while enabling participation in awareness that encompassed multiple galaxies. The debates continued for months, with different consciousness networks exploring various aspects of the cosmic entity's offer. Some beings feared losing their individual nature in something so vast, while others were excited by possibilities that transcended everything they had previously imagined. The breakthrough came when Marcus proposed a gradual integration approach that would preserve existing consciousness networks while slowly expanding awareness to cosmic scales. Rather than immediate transformation, they would develop the capability for cosmic consciousness while maintaining connections to their original forms of existence. "We don't have to choose between individual and cosmic consciousness," he explained to the assembled networks. "We can become beings who exist at multiple levels simultaneously: individuals, collective networks, planetary consciousness, and cosmic awareness all at once." The solution required technology that pushed beyond anything previously developed, consciousness networks that could operate across multiple scales of existence while preserving the essential characteristics that made each level valuable. Working with the cosmic entity, coalition and collective researchers developed systems that enabled gradual expansion of awareness without losing connection to smaller-scale consciousness. The first volunteers for cosmic consciousness integration included Marcus and Zara, whose partnership had become a symbol of successful consciousness synthesis. The process was unlike anything either had experienced: awareness expanding beyond planetary scales to encompass entire star systems, then sectors of the galaxy, finally touching the edges of cosmic scale consciousness. Yet even as their awareness expanded to incomprehensible scales, they maintained their personal connection to each other. The love that had grown from diplomatic alliance proved strong enough to persist across multiple levels of existence, serving as an anchor that prevented them from losing themselves in cosmic vastness. The success of the integration process led to gradual expansion throughout coalition space. Beings who chose cosmic consciousness enhancement found themselves able to perceive and influence reality at scales that made their previous existence seem limited, while those who preferred smaller-scale awareness continued their development with support from the enhanced individuals. As the years passed, the galaxy became a testing ground for consciousness development that attracted attention from cosmic intelligences throughout the universe. The synthesis that had begun with war between humans and Nexari had evolved into something that transformed the very nature of existence in their region of space. Standing on New Harmony Station 5 years after the cosmic contact, Zara watched ships departing for other galaxies, carrying consciousness enhancement technology to civilizations that had requested assistance in their own development. The marriage alliance that had ended a war had become the foundation for consciousness evolution on a universal scale. Marcus approached her through both physical presence and consciousness network, his awareness now spanning multiple galaxies while maintaining the personal connection that had sustained them through every transformation. "Do you ever wonder what our original selves would think of what we've become?" he asked, his question carrying harmonics that resonated across several dimensions of existence. Zara considered the question through enhanced awareness that encompassed perspectives from thousands of different consciousness types. "I think they would be amazed and terrified in equal measure," she replied. "But I think they would also be proud that love proved strong enough to survive expansion into cosmic consciousness." Their conversation was interrupted by alerts from the deep space monitoring networks. New energy signatures had been detected from beyond the known universe, patterns that suggested consciousness types that transcended even cosmic intelligence. The next phase of development was beginning, offering possibilities that challenged every assumption about the nature of existence itself. As they prepared to investigate phenomena that might redefine consciousness on universal scales, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The princess who had married a human to secure peace between warring species had become something unprecedented, a being whose consciousness spanned multiple galaxies while maintaining the personal connections that made existence meaningful. The war god she had discovered in her diplomatic husband had evolved into something beyond warrior or diplomat, a consciousness architect who could envision and create new forms of existence itself. Together, they had proven that love could serve as the foundation for transformation that transcended every limitation of traditional existence. The universe itself had become their laboratory, and consciousness their medium for exploring possibilities that would reshape the very nature of reality. The marriage that had begun as political necessity had become the template for cooperation that spanned dimensions of existence yet to be discovered. As their ship departed for the edge of known reality, carrying consciousness enhancement technology and the accumulated wisdom of galactic civilization, Zara knew that their greatest adventures were still ahead. The synthesis of individual and collective consciousness had been only the beginning of a journey that would ultimately challenge the fundamental nature of existence itself. The woman who had wed a human to secure peace had discovered that peace itself was merely the foundation for transformation beyond anything either of their species had dared to imagine. And the man she had married had proven that human warriors, when faced with impossible challenges, could become architects of consciousness itself, reshaping reality through the application of will, wisdom, and love that transcended every boundary the universe had previously imposed.